Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Excellus Blue Cross Blue Shield, working with members to find health coverage for every stage of life, helping to make care and coverage more accessible in more ways for more people across the Rochester community. Details online at excellusbcbs.com. And the Climate Solutions Accelerator, hosting a 2-day interactive summit exploring how energy is produced, distributed, and used, and how those choices shape the region's future, April 24th and 25th at the Convention Center. Registration at climategfl.org.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made in a small southern town, a couple of hours from New Orleans. The town is called Mallard, and this town is unlike any other that you've heard about. It was founded in 1848 by Alphonse de Cure. He was a light-skinned black man, the son of a white plantation owner and an enslaved person, who intended to create a community for light-skinned black people, aiming to make each generation lighter. He had felt rejected by white society, but he also felt estranged from black society due to his skin tone. And so he wanted to create a kind of third place, a town for people who were neither accepted as white nor treated as fully black. This is a fictional town created by the acclaimed author Brit Bennett. Her book, The Vanishing Half, is not set entirely in Mallard because at the center of the story are twin girls, Desiree and Stella, who run away after turning 16 years old. They are light-skinned, enough so that one of them decides to pass as a white woman. The other maintains her identity. They end up living very different lives. Their daughters, who are cousins, grow up without the full story at first. In fact, Stella's daughter Kennedy grows up fully believing that she is white, the daughter of a white woman. The Vanishing Half is Bennett's second book. Her debut was called The Mothers, and it exploded onto the literary scene a decade ago. Both books were New York Times bestsellers. The Vanishing Half was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. And now Brit Bennett is coming to Rochester next week for an event with the Rochester Speaker Series. But first, she is our guest on Connections, and we are glad to welcome Brit Bennett. Brit, thanks for being with us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And welcome in studio to my colleague Norma Holland, Chief of Staff at the Office of University Engagement and Enrichment at the University of Rochester, former journalist, of course, desk mate of mine many years ago on 13 Wham News, and you get to do some work next week with the Speaker Series, don't you?
I'm so excited and honored to have been invited to interview Brit. And
I worked for you too long to tell you to get closer to your microphone.
Goodness, look at me. Yes, sorry, Evan. Yes, I'm very excited. I was honored to be asked to interview Brit, and it's just a real honor to be a part of this.
Well, you know I love seeing you. It's great to have Norma here. And Nancy Klotz, who is the founder of the Rochester Speaker Series, is here. Congratulations on a sold-out event next week. I was going to tell people all about it, but you already sold it out. It's next Tuesday, 7 p.m., but things seem to be going well for the Speaker Series.
We are absolutely thrilled. This is the second and final event in our inaugural season. And we have launched 2026-2027 season, and subscription tickets are on sale for that right now. We'll
talk a little bit more about that coming up here. But first, on The Vanishing Half here, I want to start with some housekeeping for Brit Bennett, because we're going to talk about some... we're not going to give away too much here. We can't give away the full story. It's a remarkable book, and it takes you to a lot of different places in different generations within a family. And I want to make sure I'm pronouncing the sisters' names correctly. I was going to say Veen because I think your audio reader says Veen, although some people have said Vignes. What do you say, Britt? What's their last name?
Yeah, I think Veen is how I've said it too.
Okay, so Veen is correct here. Norma Holland, why did you love this book?
Oh, goodness. I started reading this book and I instantly felt... given my own background,
you want to describe it a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I come from a very racially mixed family. I'm Puerto Rican. I have white ancestry, black ancestry in my family, and the issue of identity growing up. I think a lot of what the twins felt is what I felt growing up. Who am I? What am I? And so I struggled with issues of identity very early on in my life. Was I white? Was I black? Was I Latina? Was I? And so. It instantly spoke to me. Where, of course, my story divides from The Vanishing Half is I also made choices, just like the twins, but I am who I am. I haven't decided to pass for anything or divorce myself from who I really am. And but what I really understand is that feeling of being part of the other, right? Not feeling a part of really any of the three things that make up who I am, but feeling almost as if I'm in a category unto myself. And whenever I meet other people who are also in between like me, I feel an instant kinship, because we've all felt that feeling of, okay, well, because society in the United States loves to force people into boxes, and they force you to they want people to choose. And I never want to choose. I just want to be who I am.
When I found out that you were going to be the one to interview Brit, and I'm reading this book going, Norma is perfect, because the conversations you and I have had over the years have moved into different territories. Sometimes about how I've never met anybody who just celebrates who you are more than you, perhaps, and your Puerto Rican heritage, and the heritage on your dad's side, and how you're proud of all of those things, and you never hide from that. I've also seen you take some, viewers on television can be rough.
Yeah.
People can be rude. People can be bigoted.
Sure.
And I've seen you take some stuff that I will never be able to relate to myself. And so that broke my heart. But I wonder if you feel like you're more fully comfortable and sort of formed at this point in your life.
I think so. I really do. I think maybe it's turning 50, but also I think the fact that we as a culture, and I think younger people today, they just get it, right? I think we can all be who we want to be, no matter what that means, because as we read in the book, there's so many different kinds of identities that we're talking about. It's not just racial, it's not just cultural, but I think people today, by and large, they are more comfortable with who they are. I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying society makes it any easier for us to be who we are, but I think that we don't feel there's not a feeling, I think, of a need to not a need to be like binary about things. I think people feel comfortable being in the middle, and I know I do, and I see that more and more with young people today, and that's very something that makes me very happy, because I have children who will also grapple with some identity with who they are as well.
So, Brit, this is a book that I think resists the urge to make anything too pat, to put something in too tidy an ending, or to kind of have this realization, whether it's the cousins or the sisters themselves, and everything sort of gets healed perfectly. It is complex. It explores how painful and difficult and sort of the constant self-assessment and reassessment, or frankly, you write about what it feels like to think about your mother as a liar or denying your own identity. How much did you want to resist the urge to give anybody too easy an ending or too easy a story with this?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Excuse me. I never want to be a moralizing type of writer. I just think that's actually not interesting to read or to write, as when you can feel that the author is coming from a place of judgment or has already made up their minds about how they feel about the characters. So I knew I didn't want to approach the book from that vantage point. I was really interested in that complexity of this kind of in-between space that you both have been speaking about. And even just the idea of that, I think part of the American mythology is sort of the idea that you can create yourself. And what does it mean to sort of create yourself? I think people do that in lots of different ways, not necessarily racial passing, but people sort of fashion a self-mythology all the time, and that felt deeply American to me. In the same time, what does it mean to accept parts of yourself or reject parts of yourself or hide parts of yourself? And just the complexity of that I think very natural inclination to try to create yourself or be the person that you want to be versus your loyalty or your ties to your community and your family.
You have said in interviews that the town of Mallard came from a conversation that you had with your mom. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, my mom's from Louisiana, and she was talking to me about these towns she remembered hearing about as a girl where people were very, very light-skinned. And I'm from California, so I had no cultural connection to that or any knowledge about these places even existing. So I just kind of made a note to myself to look into it further. And after I'd finished my first book and I started to think about what I wanted to do next, I started to research these communities and discover that they did in fact exist, and they were kind of these third spaces unto themselves. So I guess wrote into that real history, but I also wanted to create my own mythology around it and create my own characters that were emerging from this place and deciding to take two very different paths in life.
The book opens with this scene of a woman noticed by a man in the town walking alongside the road with what he presumes to be her daughter. And the daughter is very dark-skinned. And the way that the man talks about the daughter was almost breathtaking to me, in the way that that I would associate white people who are either extremely racist or fixated on race or have assumptions about what blackness means or the skin tones mean. But he is a resident of Mallard, and this is a town that has a certain view of, or I think a colorism, as you would put it. And it's a very jarring opening just for that reason. In fact, I think he used the term blue-black, which was not a term that I was familiar with. But why did you decide to set it in this way that avoided some of the more typical ideas about what Black people have experienced from white people, from sort of white antagonists? Why set it this way?
Well, I mean, as far as the opening, I knew from the beginning that I wanted to really establish where you are. Like, I've kind of crash landed the reader in this place that they don't expect to necessarily find themselves. And it's a community that has very specific rules, and those rules are policed very intently. And I wanted to immediately just sort of introduce you to those rules of the community. And I also just, like, as a reader, love a book that starts with somebody who's like mysteriously returned from somewhere. So I think there was like a pleasure in that, of who's this woman? Why is she here? What's the deal with the kid? So there's an intrigue around that. But also, yeah, I wanted to immediately establish what the values of this community are. And so you immediately know, oh, this is going to be really bad for this kid if this kid has to be here. So that was kind of what I was thinking about for the opening. But I was just interested in writing a story about race that wasn't really about centering whiteness or white people or the perspectives of white people, to be honest. Of course, whiteness is a specter that sort of hovers over the story. But to me, this is really a book about a Black community that is really fractured, and a Black family that is really fractured, and how is it possible for those different pieces of this family to kind of find their way back to each other?
Yeah, you've said that you've always thought that the most interesting thing to happen to Black people is not necessarily white people. It's what happens within a Black community. I mean, that certainly is at the core of this book. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that that's fair. It was really, like I said, the book really started with my mom's experience growing up in Louisiana, and her experience of color and colorism, and thinking about setting the book within that specific community. I didn't know at the time that the book was going to leave that town, or that it was going to become multi-generational and it was going to, take place in all these different parts of the country. I never set out to do that. I just really thought it was going to just be in this one little small town. But from the beginning, that was just sort of my intention, was to explore the implications of coming from a community like this, and what that does to you throughout the rest of your life to grow up in a place like this.
Before we get back into some of the themes here, I also want to ask you if you're surprised at, in any way, at the success of this book. The Mothers comes out in 2016, and it's on the bestseller list. It is critically acclaimed, and this comes out at a time where it wasn't advantageous. It actually came out during the pandemic year, and yet it blows up too. And it's on the bestseller list. You're shortlisted for awards, and the world is looking at you as like this incredible new voice in fiction. I wonder if any of that has caught you by surprise, or if you've sort of settled into a groove now as a writer with that.
I mean, I think all of it caught me by surprise. I think, as you said, the timing of it, I remember not knowing what was going to be the state of bookstores, and, we were all in lockdown. I was in New York, so very intense experience of the pandemic, and had no idea if anybody was going to want to be reading a book, or just what the vibe was going to be when the book came out. So there's no part of me that ever expected this book to catch on in the way that it did, or for me to still be talking about it, 6 years later, the fact that people are still reading it and still are engaging with the book. So I would say all of it caught me by surprise.
Charlie writes in to say, Evan, I love to read and take suggestions from a few people, and my daughter recommended The Vanishing Half. I loved it. Just the premise alone captivated me, but the many unexpected plot twists kept me up late until the book fell on my chest. It was one of those rare books where I'd slow down my reading, not wanting the book to end. Thank you, Brit Bennett. I'm sure you get a lot of that these days. That doesn't get old, does it, Brit?
No, I mean, that's really sweet. And I don't take it for granted because there's so many things that could be capturing anyone's attention at any given moment. And especially now that, it's not lockdown anymore. People could be doing a million other things and traveling and going to sports or whatever. So for people to, devote their scant free time reading my book is not something I take for granted at all.
We're talking to acclaimed author Brit Bennett, who is coming to Rochester as part of the Rochester Speaker Series 1 week from tonight. The event is, sad to say, sold out already, but they have big plans here. And Nancy Klotz, just briefly here, for people who are not familiar with the series, it's relatively new. Tell people what the series is all about and what you may have planned coming up here.
Yes, our mission is to bring best-selling authors and artists and thought leaders to Rochester in person. We really value community gathering over a shared love of stories. We launched our inaugural season in 2025-2026, and our upcoming season, 2026-2027, has just been announced, and we are very excited about the authors who will be here for that as well.
More information online, and we have been blessed to have a chance to talk to the authors beforehand, and I hope we can continue to do that because you're aiming high in this series, Nancy, and so far so good, I think.
Yes, we've just been really overwhelmed with the community response. It has been amazing, and we are thrilled to have this level of support for these kinds of literary arts activities.
I always hesitate to ask this of authors, but I do have to ask Brit because, I remember years ago when one of my first jobs out of school, I was covering the studio release of the first Harry Potter movie. And the Onion headline was, "New Harry Potter movie opens kids' minds to the magic of not reading." And, so we can joke. But then again, every author can maybe dream about the idea that maybe a streaming series or maybe a movie. And I don't know where things stand with your work on the book so far, Brit, but I keep hearing rumblings that people are bidding for you. So can you give us any update there?
I actually do not have any update.
Okay.
The machinations of Hollywood are very mysterious to me. So I don't have any update about adaptation, but that would, I think it's exciting for any author to kind of see your work translated. I imagine it's very scary. I've never gotten to that point in my work where I've seen somebody else sort of kind of do their bidding with my book. So I think that would be a little bit scary to imagine. And, when you're a novelist, you are kind of the dictator of the world that you've created. So to hand it off to Hollywood, which is so much of, work by committee, it's just, hundreds and thousands of people involved in whatever project. I think that's a little nerve-wracking, but I think it's exciting because it does bring a new audience to your work, and people who may not rush to grab it from the bookstore might watch it and then they might want to read the book.
All right, here will be the worst question of the hour, but I'm just going to ask: have you thought about who might play Desiree and Stella in your mind? Do you have people in your mind?
I don't. I have been asked that question a lot, and I always thought it would be exciting to kind of discover like a new actor or some kind of an up and coming person. Like I think that would be really fun. But I think it's kind of challenging because you have twins, and are you gonna have one person play both roles? Are you going to? I know now they can do like CGI with twins, where they'll have like two different actors but kind of make them look like twins. So I've had, conversations about that type of thing, but I have no idea. So it would be exciting to see.
I was thinking, Brett, what was the name of the movie with Michael B. Is it Michael B. Jordan? Sinners.
Oh, Sinners.
Sinners.
Yeah, he played both characters.
Yeah, right.
But isn't it something
right.
like they can do that. But I remember watching the film and thinking, wow, wait. Oh, wait, he's two different people. But he's played them so convincingly that they were two different people in my head.
He only got one Oscar for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, indeed. So I guess, Norma, anything's possible.
Anything's possible. I can't wait, though. I'm so excited for Brett.
And so let me get to some of the big themes in the book, and then we're going to kind of drill into some of the plot, again, without giving away too much, but as much as Charlie, I think, is right to say there's twists, there's some really interesting twists and things that happen. It's a book that, to me, takes its time. It travels throughout time and generations. It moves into different parts of the country. It tells its story very carefully and very thoughtfully. Anyway, that was my interpretation of it. But the bigger theme of passing is one that I wanted to ask Brit about. So passing is a subject that has been occasionally covered in literature. And in general, when you started conceiving of this idea, the vanishing half, how much are you aware of what's already been written? How much are you looking to sort of either build on certain themes or to create entirely new kind of themes from whole cloth?
Yeah, I mean, I'd read, texts like Passing by Nell Larson. I think that's probably one of the most iconic books about passing. So I'd read books like that, and some more contemporary works had taken on those themes. But I had kind of a basic understanding of it. But when I did more reading about it, I think the thing I just remained fascinated by was just the sheer unknowability of passing. Because, if you are someone who has successfully passed, then nobody will ever know that you did it. Mm-hmm. So we have no cataloging of all the people who have passed. Like there's no accounting for it. The only people whose stories we have are people who have revealed themselves, or people who made deathbed confessions, or people who have been discovered, or a lot of people who would pass for a job and then they would be white at work and then they would come home and they would be black again. Like there are all these different ways that people experience passing. A lot of people, I think it was moment to moment. It wasn't as dramatic of an overhaul as Stella completely disappearing into the white world. My understanding is that was far rarer than a person who, hey, I'll get paid more at my job if I'm white, so I'll be white at work. Like that was a bit more common. But as I started reading about it, I just became really fascinated with this phenomenon that the very nature of it is that it cannot be known. So what does that mean to kind of write about some type of thing like that? So it became interesting to do like a little bit of research into it and read some of these accounts and to think about, I think, what was lost by people. I think often when we talk about passing, we think about what people gain, of the access that they gain, or the privilege, the wealth, the safety, the security. Like we can understand intellectually why people might have passed in the mid 20th century. But I think sometimes we focus less on all the things that they lost in order to gain that.
Mm-hmm. We're talking to Brit Bennett, the author of the Vanishing Half. And if you're just joining us, the passing that Brit is talking about in her book, it would be one thing to write about the story of a black woman who vanishes into the white world, as Brit describes, and as happens here. It's another for that person to be the twin sister of someone who does not decide to do that and ends up with a very different life. And so that's part of what this book is about. And Norma, it's one thing to say, you can try to pass or try to convince somebody that you are one thing. It's another when society makes assumptions about you without knowing. And that's one thing. I mean, like in your life, have people said to you either after a broadcast or after an event that they didn't know about the black part of your heritage?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I wonder how that hits you.
I'm always, sometimes the reaction was, oh, and I thought, and what's wrong with that?
What's at the end of the sentence? Yeah.
There's black is not a dirty word. You see? And so, it's nothing for me it's nothing I'm ashamed of. Why would I? It's who I am. It's what I am. I'm a big mix. Like so many Americans. I have so much. If you look at, if we were to all spit into a test tube and get it, get a report out, we all might be surprised by what we find out. So there's no part of me that I'm ashamed of. Right. And so, yes, I say, yes, I am. And then I'm this and I'm that. And I choose to be who I am and I choose to be myself. Now, as a result, I sometimes I hadn't always felt accepted by different groups because maybe I'm not, white enough for some, not black enough for others, not Hispanic enough for others. And believe you me, the things people have said are very cruel. I've had people say to me, "Oh, I thought you were pretending to be this or pretending to be that," and I thought, "Really? You thought I was pretending? well, gee, I must be speaking Spanish, very terribly if you think I'm pretending. But it was really, it was sad. It's sad. You know what I'm saying? And I've had people in very high positions of leadership in this city say those things to me, and it's pretty sad.
And occasionally I've, back when we used to work together side by side every day.
Yeah.
I've seen people ask you straight out, like, well, like, what are you?
Yeah. I love that question. What are you?
And like, I always cringe when you would get like that question because I'm like, oh my God.
I joke and I go, you got time?
Well, you show a lot of grace. You show probably more grace than sometimes people deserve there. How do you interpret it when people are genuinely curious about your own sort of background?
Well,
do you think it's none of their business? Do you think that they're...
I find, look, if you come to me with from a place of curiosity, if you ask questions with genuine curiosity because you're interested, I'm willing to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't always know what people mean when they ask questions. Mm-hmm. So sometimes if I don't know you very well, I might deflect the conversation. But at this age I'm at now, I just flat out say it because I'm not really worried about what you're thinking, and I certainly am not going to be put into a box that you want to put me in. So, many times maybe I am a little flip about it because I'm this and I'm that and I'm who I am, 100% who I am, me. Right. And so because people, I think, want you to choose. Right. There's always that box thing. I hated the boxes filling out on, forms, this and that. I want to make my own box. Right. So I sometimes will deflect. And then if I know you well enough, I'll tell you the whole story. You got to hear the whole story.
Well, I love working alongside. I missed that.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. You learn a lot about a person sitting next to them for 4 hours at a time.
Yes, you definitely.
You learn a lot of things.
But I learned a lot about society, good and bad, and the way either people would email you. Frankly, the way some executives talk to you.
Oh yeah, I always do. I should be in therapy, and maybe I will one day. Or I should write a book. But there's a lot of stories that I never want to come across as sounding as if I'm whining, or I learned a lot. I had wonderful experiences, and some of them weren't great, right? But they make up who I am right now, and one day maybe that's a book I'll write.
Oh, well, listen, Norma is...
I don't know if it's going to be a New York Times bestseller like Brit's, though.
There's not a whole lot of those. That's why we have Brit Bennett today. That's why she's coming to the Rochester Speaker Series. Norma Holland could fill this chair any day you want, by the way. You ought to come. Well, you really should. I mean, like...
He's much nicer to me now that I'm that we're
not
not working
get
together.
Out of here. Get out of here. But on that note, there's something that Brit has said in interviews that I think is valuable to hear from the author herself. Brit, you have said that there is a toxic ideology of light skin being better in society. And part of the question in the book is how do you sort of shake that as you get older? But outside of the book in general, how do we start to shake that as a society?
I mean, I don't know that I have the answer to that, but yeah, I mean, I think, I like I said, I started this book from this kind of center of this community that believes in this ideology. And I think for some of the characters, I think for some of the characters, it's very protective. It's the idea that, like for Stella, I think for her, it's not even that she thinks that being lighter makes you more beautiful or some of these other things. It's like for her, it's safety. She wants to be safe. The twins witnessed this terrible violence when they were children that really kind of shook both of them into these different ways. And I think for Stella, she's thinking this is the only way that I can get to safety is by kind of leveraging my light skin and actually becoming white, just sort of taking it one step farther. So I think for her, that's what it means. But I think for a lot of these characters, I think for Desiree, on the other hand, she kind of feels that the proximity to whiteness is actually not that protective because she's seen terrible things happen in Mallard where everybody is really light. So if that can still happen here and it can still happen to light-skinned people, then light skin actually doesn't protect you. So I found it interesting to think how they could both kind of have these very different conclusions about what light skin affords them and the limitations of that. So yeah, to me, that was kind of an interesting tension just between those sisters and how they kind of draw these very different conclusions from witnessing the same events as they were children.
Yeah. And it's not like the twins were 15 before they left, 15 years old, and they had this fight about, well, should we try to pass? I mean, for Stella, you've said that sometimes it's a small choice that leads to a sort of a big cascade of events. And for Stella, it's passing for a job interview. It's sort of an act of pragmatics that leads to that. And I thought that was a very interesting choice as well as a writer, that this wasn't sort of necessarily a grand plan, but you can understand how in the, frankly, often racist world of hiring and the assumptions in the hiring world, a person who feels like they could pass would see that advantage. And I just thought that was a very real, sort of relatable. Go ahead, Norma.
I want to say something about the idea of the, passing for the job and passing in general. Sadly, some of the biggest perpetrators of this colorism come from within the community. So I want to go back to the very beginning of the book. Like, Brit said, you put this, you put Desiree, right, walking into town again. And, and the harshest words you hear are from another man who's from that town. And that's been my experience, too, is some of the cruelest things that have been said about, skin tone and color come from our own community, sadly. And I'm talking about, the Black community, but also Latino community. Colorism exists in the Latino world as well. And there is this myth, this belief that whiter is better or lighter is better. And that's a very real issue in communities that, though this is a work of fiction, I know Brit knows that's not fiction at all. Like, that's a very real thing that happens within communities of color, where there is this feeling of like, the paper bag, test. How dark are you compared to the paper bag? And we've seen it in literature, we've seen it in films. This whole thing, but it's sad. It is sad. I felt really, I felt sad for the characters in that sense. I felt heartbroken for them.
I agree, but again, I'll throw in an observation I have as a reader, and we'll see what Brit says about this. Again, this is not a book where the two twin sisters, one decides to pass as white, ends up going to L.A., the other does not pass as white, very different life. And the book is not like, well, one's the bad sister, one's the good sister, or Mallard is the bad town of misguided people.
Sure.
There's a lot of empathy,
yes,
as a reader, for the people who you read the stuff, the things that they said about, I think, Jude at the beginning of the book. It's just so sad. Yeah. It's shocking and sad. And it is awful in a way.
Yeah.
But it's not a caricature of like good, bad, simple characters.
Total gradients here.
Yeah. That's how I saw it. Anyway, my feeling, Brit, was you resisted the urge to just give us a good sister and a bad sister, a bad town misguided. I mean, it's a lot more complex than that. And I wonder if you can share a little bit of your thought process there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Norma was saying, people are, very invested in hierarchies. Wherever you find yourself, there's going to be a hierarchy within that hierarchy. And that's certainly the case in this book. But I think also I didn't want to demonize Stella for her choices because, just like as a person, I'm like, who am I to say what I would do if I were in this same situation in the Jim Crow South and I needed a job, So I just, like, as a person, and like I said, as an author, I just don't find it interesting to kind of judge my character. But I think also when I realized that the book was going to have different sort of a geographical range, and I was going to leave Mallard, I realized that I didn't want to judge this town, because I think as a person who comes from, I guess the coast, I grew up in California, I'm in New York now, I think that there can be this kind of patronizing attitude towards the South, and this idea that, oh, those people there are the problem, that's where the racists live. And it's like, well, guess what? When Stella gets to LA, there's going to be a huge hubbub about this Black family trying to move into her, cul-de-sac. So I wanted to kind of follow the ways that race was acting on these characters, even once they've left this place. I introduced you to this town, and you're thinking, oh, this is a really intense and harsh place. But even once they leave there, they're going to experience race in these different ways. So I didn't want to uniquely demonize Mallard or uniquely demonize the people who live there, because I don't think that that's really the experience of race in this country or in this world. It's not restricted to one geographical location. It's something that's acted on you and that you experience wherever you are.
We're talking to Brit Bennett, author of the National Book Award-nominated novel, The Vanishing Half, and that is just one of the accolades that Brit has piled up for her work. She is coming to Rochester next week as a guest of the Rochester Speaker Series. My colleague Norma Holland, who is with us, will be interviewing Brit next Tuesday night for an event that is sadly sold out already. But there's much more to come with the Speaker Series coming up here, and they're trying to bring in some of the really decorated authors in this country, and you're already seeing that. So we got to take our only break of the hour. We're going to come back, and there's a few more things in this book that I want to crack open without giving away too much here. Talking to Brit Bennett about The Vanishing Half.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, supporting residents to become active members of the community, from developing life skills to gaining independence. Mary Cariola Center, transforming lives of people with disabilities. More online at marycariola.org.
During this brief break, Norma Holland said, can I share what Norma said to me? Because we were kind of each flipping through going, what can we talk about without giving too much away?
Yeah.
And you said there was a number of times in the book where you literally kind of went,
whoa.
Whoa.
I put the book down and I went, I got to read that again. It was so good, you know. And it's so many layers. All I can say is that if you what you think this book is about, it is, yes, it's about that and so much more. Like, you have to pick up the book and read it, because it is a many layered parfait. I mean, literally so many characters, and each character is so rich. And when we talk about identity in this book, there are so many identities. That's all I'm going to say. So many identities that are...
See, I don't trust you to ask a question that doesn't give like a huge plot point away or like a big twist.
Is that so? Yeah. You have little faith.
No, go for it, because I've got a couple things I want to ask about.
It's called it a parfait, Evan.
No, there are some incredible twists here.
Yeah.
And so while I give you... If you want to come, I'm just going to ask Britt about one thing that...
Yeah, please do.
Again, going back to the nuance of the characters, I want to imagine what it would be like to be growing up thinking that you know your identity, that you know your background, and then for Kennedy starting to figure out, like, you know, for various reasons. Again, I'm not trying to give away too much here. Kennedy and Jude, very different lives and very different situations, and very different skin tones and very different conceptions of selves. But for Kennedy, who wants to be an actor and sees her life a certain way, to start to confront that maybe your mother's been lying to you, and to try to maybe pin your mother on that, and to realize that my mom is definitely now avoiding what I'm trying to get at here, and to start to wonder if it's going to fall apart. Again, you didn't make this 30-year-old character who is been able to pass herself without knowing it to become like this stuck-up antagonist, a villain character per se. Again, it's so much richer than that. But I'm trying to figure out, like, Britt, what would I do if everything I kind of thought I knew all of a sudden was not what I knew, and I didn't know if I could even trust my parents or if I even knew myself anymore. Take me through how you thought about scenes like that and a character who would be going through that.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the idea of Kennedy, you know, like you said, not being a total villain, but just being a little bit of a brat. You know, she just kind of grows up with a lot, like everything kind of handed to her, and but there's something fundamentally missing from her life, because I think so much of what it means to pass, at least how I've conceived of it, is there's so much that you have to hide about yourself. Like, you can't just tell stories about your childhood. You can't, you know, she can't even really acknowledge that she has this twin sister. And so you have like this relationship with your mother that's fundamentally strained and distant, and you kind of have this sense that something is not quite right, but you don't really know what it is. And that's something that lingers in your life as you're aging. So the moment when she starts to kind of piece this together, she realizes, oh, this is why there's been something fundamentally off about this relationship, and about just her mother, and the way that her mother is such a hidden person from her. So I found that to be really interesting. And then I just think that question of how much does this knowledge change about how you see yourself? Because I think that's what I found so interesting about, you know, stories where people will do 23andMe, or they'll do some type of genetic testing, and they'll discover something about their family history that they didn't know. And for some people, that makes them want to dive all the way in into discovering this new culture, and they want to visit the country, and they want to learn the language and all of this. And for some people, it's just like, nope, I was raised Italian. I still believe myself to be Italian. Like, I don't care what that piece of paper says. That has nothing to do with me. And I found that so interesting because I think it's a question of like, how would I react if I, learned something really shocking about my family history? Would that fundamentally change my sense of myself? Or would it just be kind of a piece of trivia that I would just kind of file away in the back of my mind and not think about again? And I think it really depends on who you are and how you react to it. But I found that question to be really interesting of what this character specifically would do when faced with this information and the complexity of how she would feel.
Isn't it interesting we live in a time, Brett, where, not only can you find out what genetic makeup you have, but we take tests now to determine our likelihood of developing certain illnesses. So we get to know ourselves at that even cellular level, right? That like the medical level, right? And so there's so much we can learn about ourselves. And what would we do with that information, right? Like it's a very interesting question. But no, I found that interesting. Can I ask my question without giving it away, Evan?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
I'm going to give away another plot detail in a moment.
No,
I can't. No, I'm not.
I'm going to beat you to it.
I want to read a
because-
passage in a moment.
Wait,
but
hold
go
on. I
ahead.
got to Britt, you not only this book, again, I called it a parfait because there's so many layers, but you one of your characters, I'm just going to say one, is trans. And that's where I really loved how you treated this character. Have people talked to you about that? How lovingly and respectfully you treat this trans character?
Yeah, I mean, I think I, tried my best to, I think I keep saying like so much of this book is writing outside of my personal experience because of so many characters are moving from one identity to another.
Right.
So even though I'm like kind of nominally writing about Black people, like most of these experiences are not mine. So something I was aware of and I wanted to kind of handle with sensitivity. And I think it's been really gratifying, particularly to hear from trans readers, many of whom I think the kind of saddest part was a lot of trans readers who kind of braced themselves when they got to this character because they're just used to encountering, if you encounter a trans character in a book, like something bad is going to happen to that person.
Right.
There's going to be some type of trauma that they're going to have to experience, an act of violence that they're going to have to experience. They're going to die. They're not going to make it to the end of the book. So I think a lot of readers told me that they kind of like, physically braced when they sort of reached this point of the book. And I never wanted to write that kind of storyline or that kind of character. I just wanted to think about this other character who's also moving through the world with a complex idea of identity, like the twins. And in his case, his journey is moving towards himself. It's not moving away from who he is, versus Stella's journey is kind of moving away from herself in this way. So there was a way that those storylines just kind of reverberated off of each other in a way that I found to be really just like interesting and fun to write.
I just want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for that. I think it was beautiful the way you treated this character as not being tragic, but as being fully human, and I loved it.
And vital. I mean,
vital to the development of character and everything. It's a central character.
The passage I want to read comes from a point where the cousins are talking about their own identities, and Jude is listening to Kennedy. So Jude is a woman now who is never wrestled with the fact that she's a Black woman, and Kennedy is, again, learning about herself. And so this is where Kennedy is thinking about Mallard, and this description's amazing. So Jude walked Kennedy down to the lobby, and Kennedy slowly wrapped her scarf around her neck. "What's it like?" Kennedy said. "Mallard." She had imagined a town like Mayberry. Folksy, homey, women leaving pies to cool on their windowsills. A town so small that everybody knew your name. In a different life, she might have visited over the summer. She could have played with Jude in front of their grandmother's house. But Jude just laughed. "Awful," she said. "They only like light Negroes out there. You'd fit right in." She said it so offhandedly that Kennedy almost didn't realize it. "I'm not a Negro," she said. Jude laughed again, this time uneasily. "Well, your mother is," she said. So? "So that makes you one too." "It doesn't make me anything," Kennedy said. "My father's white, and you don't get to show up and tell me what I am." It wasn't a race thing. She just hated the idea of anyone telling her who she had to be. She was like her mother in that way. If she'd been born black, she would have been perfectly happy about it. But she wasn't. And who was Jude to tell her that she was something that she was not? Nothing had changed, really. She had learned one thing about her mother. But what did that amount to when you looked at the totality of her life? A single detail had been moved and replaced. Swapping out one brick wouldn't change a house into a fire station. She was still herself. Nothing had changed. Nothing had changed at all. I'm reading that section, Brit, and I'm going, oh, things have changed. Come on. Like, come on. And I wonder, like, if you're like channeling, is Jude is channeling Brit there, going like, Kennedy, you're in denial here. Where were you at there, Brit?
I mean, I think they're both right. They're both wrong. It's like, I think, like I said, I believe that, I'm generally oriented towards thinking like, yeah, you can determine who you are. You could say how you identify. That's like an individual choice. Like, I do believe that. But also at the same time, like, yeah, I don't believe that nothing has changed for her. I think that she's spiraling a little bit because she's realized this fact of hers. And I think, it's also just, I think part of it is there's something, and I think, in the history of this country, there's something so totalizing about Blackness that's kind of unique of, back to a one drop rule, because it's the idea that, I remember I had a professor who would talk about, everyone has a Cherokee grandmother, like everybody sort of self-identifies that way, but they don't think that that makes them a Cherokee,
Right.
They don't think that that's, but if you had a Black grandmother, then that would make you Black, that's like the way that we like understand race. And the professor was just like, it's more likely that you have a Black grandmother than you have a Cherokee grandmother, but that's not the way that we think about race in this country, because what would that mean for, untold amounts of white people to discover that they have a Black grandmother? That would be something that would fundamentally shake them to their core, I think, a lot of people. So I think that it is something that really shakes up Kennedy's sense of herself and her sense of her mother, and, what it means to exist in this world that she thought was one way and she finds out it's another way. But at the same time, I'm sympathetic to that idea that, like, discovering, one detail about your family history doesn't have to be this kind of obliteration of yourself, in this sense that everything you thought was true about yourself is not true. I think that a lot of that is kind of the way that we think about Blackness as being, still this kind of one drop ideology. But yeah, so I think they're both right. I think they're both wrong. And I've found that conversation to be really fun to write, where Jude says this thing very casually, like she just thinks that obviously this is true about you. And for Kennedy, it's not obvious, and it's not something that she's really willing to accept, although it is something that continues to she continues to live with it, even though she doesn't really want to face it.
Is it a threat to Kennedy in that moment? Is that why she's denying it? Does it threaten her?
I think it threatens her sense of just herself and how she thought of where she existed in the world and what you thought about your family, and now you're having questions about your parents' marriage and all of these, your family history. And Kennedy has this she has like kind of a pivotal race moment when she's a child that I think also kind of reverberates throughout the book, of her having this moment of kind of lashing out and racial aggression. So to do that type of thing and then later think to yourself, oh, well, maybe I myself am Black. What does that mean? Right. I think there's a lot going on, but I had a lot of fun writing that kind of Kennedy section, because I didn't think originally that I was even going to really go into her perspective, but I just kept being like, what is this character going to do with this like revelation, or what is she going to do with this knowledge, and how is it going to change her? And the idea that Kennedy is an actor, she's a person who is always playing a character, and she comes to this realization that's like, oh my God, what if I've been playing a character my whole life and I just didn't even know it?
Amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
Amazing.
I love that. Yeah. It's unraveling a sweater, right? Like you're unraveling the thread is, yeah. I love that you talk about Blackness as all encompassing, and that, the one drop rule and all of that, we've often heard about.
You're going to have an amazing conversation.
Oh, I
next
can't
week,
wait.
Norma
This
Holland.
is I'm so excited I can't wait. I have so many questions about the other characters
Yeah.
and how you conceived of them, Brit, and what you were thinking of when you wrote them. I think it's very telling about the partners that each one of these characters picks and selects for herself, for themselves. And so I have questions about that and a lot about. I couldn't put the book down. And I want to say something. I haven't read a book from cover to cover in many years because I was reading kids' books for my kids for so many years, right? I mean,
Yeah.
seriously,
You read
right?
a lot of kids' books.
I wasn't reading any
100%.
Steinbeck or anything. Because of this and because of this series, I am now
You're like, I'm
picking up
back,
books.
baby.
I am back. I am a book reader and I am
Brit
back.
Bennett's got you back.
Yes, she does.
That's I
I'm
love
also
it.
reading The Mothers. If you haven't picked up that book, that is another one that I can't put down.
Well, Brit Bennett, congratulations on all the success you've had with this. I know Rochester is excited to see you for the sold out event next week, and you are generous to give us an hour of your time. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Brit Bennett, the author of The Vanishing Half, The Mothers, as Norma said, among some other interesting projects that would be a whole other conversation with Brit. She's a National Book Award nominated novelist, and I wish we could tell you there were seats available next Tuesday. There's not for Brit, but Nancy Klotz, for what you got coming up in the fall, what do you want people to know going forward with the Rochester Speaker Series?
Yeah, I do want to just emphasize we're so excited to have Norma Holland interviewing Brit as part of this program, and all of our energy is focused on making that as meaningful an event for the Rochester community as possible. In the fall and spring of 2026, 2027, we are hoping to maintain the same exciting level of programming. And we have Minjin Lee coming in October 27th. She's the author of Pachinko. We have Percival Everett, the most well-known probably for James, coming in on April 6th, 2027. And we will close out our season with Lulu Miller, co-host of Radiolab, award-winning science journalist.
Wow.
So you got a lot coming up here. Congratulations on that. Have fun with that. Thanks for coming in today. Norma Holland, have fun next week.
Thank you, friend.
I love you. Thanks for being here.
Love you too.
And from all of us at Connections, thanks for being with us. We are back with you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.